This mom was in a horrific car crash at 8 months pregnant, but when she woke up in the hospital, she was no longer pregnant. While driving through town to visit family in February 2017, Amy Wilson was caught up in a fatal car crash. Her own injuries were severe, but of even more concern to doctors was the condition of her unborn baby. Wilson was just weeks away from giving birth, in fact, when the accident happened. But when she woke up in the hospital, she was no longer pregnant. Amy, 32, lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with her husband Kyle and daughter Ruby. On February 16, 2017, she drove to Fruit Heights, Utah with Ruby to visit her parents. Kyle was at work when he received the call informing him that his wife and daughter had been involved in a serious accident.
If you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
After finding a babysitter for Ruby at around 11:30 a.m. that morning, Amy was driving to Salt Lake LDS Temple. As she continued her journey, however, she would literally have no idea what hit her when the car was struck by an out-of-control vehicle. A young driver, 18-year-old Abraham Miranda, was traveling with his two friends, Vidal Pacheco and Dylan Hernandez. As the teen approached an intersection traveling north, he realized he was about to collide with an oncoming car. Miranda consequently took evasive action. As Miranda swerved to avoid a collision, his Chevy Impala hit the center median, flinging the vehicle into oncoming traffic. The car was then struck by Amy's Honda Pilot, sending her into a spin. Her vehicle careened off the road and hit a building before it finally came to a stop. The authorities subsequently alleged that Miranda had been street racing. A police investigation into the crash found that the teenager had been traveling at a speed in excess of 95 miles per hour when he'd lost control of his vehicle. The legal speed limit on that particular stretch of road was, in fact, 40 miles per hour. One witness to the crash claimed that Miranda had been traveling at such a speed that he'd been unable to slow down at the intersection. Another witness stated he'd seen the teenager put his hand out of the window and shake it at the car that Miranda was supposedly racing. Miranda's two teenage passengers were killed in the wreck. All three of them were West High School seniors when the accident happened. Miranda, who later told investigators that he was in a rush to get to an arcade, initially evaded arrest. Once he'd been located, charges of manslaughter and reckless endangerment were brought against him. Amy's injuries were also severe. Her spleen and kidney had ruptured, in fact, causing internal bleeding. One lung had collapsed, and she suffered a brain injury, as well as fractures to her pelvis, ribs, and knee. Of as much concern to doctors, however, was her unborn baby. Amy had been 34 weeks pregnant when the accident occurred, in fact. She had no recollection of the crash itself, or indeed anything else from that morning. All she knew was that when she woke up just over a week after the accident, she was no longer pregnant. It transpired that, fearing for her unborn baby's life, doctors had performed an emergency C-section on Amy. Unconscious for days following the crash, Amy was oblivious to the whole procedure. Her baby girl had suffered serious injuries of her own, however. At the moment of her birth, in fact, she had no heartbeat. Doctors immediately began performing CPR on her. After 11 minutes, the baby was thankfully resuscitated. Like her mom, though, Grace had also suffered brain damage. As a result, doctors were pessimistic about her chances of recovery. They told us that potentially she could have never fed herself, Kyle, who'd rushed from Colorado to be with his wife and baby, told Fox 8. She would have to be fed through a tube in her stomach, not to be able to use her left side, not to be able to speak. This was the shocking news that Amy was given weeks after the crash. Because of her own injuries, of course, she hadn't been aware of what was going on around her. As she told Fox 13, "I was out for about 8 days after the accident. I wasn't involved at all in the emotions of the C-section or anything." Amy's own recovery was rapid, however. After she awoke, she quickly moved on from the SICU and into rehab. Her progress through therapy was quick, and, defying doctors' predictions, she was released from hospital after 35 days to continue her rehabilitation at home. Amy was expected to feel the effects of her brain injury for around a year, but by June 2017, just 4 months after the crash, the mom of two was fighting fit. Not only had she started walking again, but she could also even run a couple of miles without stopping. However, the recovery of her baby, who she and Kyle had named Grace, was expected to take a lot longer. That was if she would ever fully recover at all, of course. Having survived being born without a heartbeat, doctors still feared that the baby's brain damage could be permanent with lasting physical effects. An update from Amy's brother on a GoFundMe page read, "We were told that she could potentially have problems using her left side, crying, and feeding herself. But it seemed that Grace had inherited her mother's resilience, because by June she had grown into a healthy and happy baby girl." The update continued, "We have witnessed so many miracles over the past 3 months. Grace has far surpassed any of her prognoses. She wiggles all of her limbs, cries, coos, smiles, and breastfeeds. Her pediatrician also told us that so far she is on track developmentally for her age." The Wilsons' miracle baby has so far shown no lasting effects of her injuries. Moreover, while Abraham faces up to 30 years in jail for causing the crash, the family holds no resentment toward the teenager. Amy told Fox 13, "We feel that is kind of one of the greatest gifts or blessing, that we've been able to forgive."
If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.